Black Myth Wukong is an incredible Souls-like that changes up the formula and does things a bit differently than the more well-known Soulsborne games. In my opinion, these changes are for the better. There are some amazing new mechanics and really cool features in this particular Souls-like which you may not be aware of, and therefore it may feel a little alien at first. However, with this video I aim to give you a rundown of the 14 most important things you should know as you start off your journey to the West. Get it? Because that's the name of the novel the game's based on? Yeah, you get it. And on that note, let's jump into the top 14 things you need to know early on as you take your first steps into Black Myth Wukong. Tip number 1, you are either gonna love or hate, depending on what kind of gamer you are, and how passionate you are about the difficulty of Souls games being a core mechanic. And that is because, as you're progressing through the game and defeating enemies and bosses, you will earn sparks. This is what you will use to level up your gigantic talent tree of well over 250 talents. But, and this is why I say this will be a bit controversial, fear not, because unlike most Souls-likes, you will not lose your unspent experience points and your unspent sparks when you die. So, for example, if you have 3 unspent talent points and you're 90% of the way to getting your 4th and you die, you will not lose your experience. There are no consequences other than obviously losing a bit of progress and having to fight your way through the enemies that respawned back to where you were again. But you don't lose your money, you don't lose your experience, and you don't lose your sparks. Therefore, you don't have to go back and loot your body again to regain your soul or whatever it may be. So in that way, the game is a lot more forgiving than your usual Souls-like, which makes this much more accessible and appealing to a wider audience. And the reason I don't mind this is because the game is still damn challenging, and you're still going to need to get good to be able to get through the game. It's just now it's a little bit less intimidating because you don't have the fear of losing too much, and hopefully more people will be comfortable putting themselves in dangerous situations and tackling a challenging Souls-like, because this is still a very challenging Souls-like. It's just you have that added comfort blanket now so that it doesn't put as many people off. Which, as I say personally, can only be a good thing, right? Talking of sparks, you will be gaining lots of these. You will be leveling up every few enemies, because there is a huge list of skills, stats, and abilities up for grabs. Every single one is very valuable and will give you a big boost to one stat or another, be it things like extra health or stamina, even brand new moves, more mana so you can cast more spells, and even completely new abilities and movesets. And now that you know that, tip number 2 is to level up immediately, pretty much always, with a couple of rare exceptions when abilities start to cost multiple sparks towards the end of the game. But basically, you don't need to go and rest at a Keeper's Shrine, which is this game's version of a bonfire, to be able to level up. You can literally just open up your menu and do it at any time you want. So as soon as you get a new spark, as long as most of your abilities are still only costing 1 spark to level up, go and get a new ability immediately, because you are just detrimenting yourself by not doing this. And the reason I say there is no downside, some people might be worrying, but what if I don't know exactly what build I'm going yet? What if I don't know what to choose yet? There is a seemingly infinite and free amount of respecs in this game. So you can try out as many builds and as many different playstyles as you like with absolutely no consequence. All you need to do is go and rest at a Keeper's Shrine, and you can reallocate as many or as few sparks as you like. In fact, the game very much encourages this because certain situations and certain bosses have very specific weaknesses and will require you to change up your build unless you're just an absolute god at Souls-likes. So spend them levels and respec often if you want to try out the wealth of different playstyles involved in this game. Tip number 3 is about locking on. There is a very good use for the R3 button because it will allow you to spot lots of hard to detect enemies. Lots of the enemies you'll be fighting in this game have adapted to their environment. They are effectively permanently camouflaged. They're not specifically trying to lie in ambush most of the time anyway, unlike Lords of the Fallen, where there is literally an ambush around every single corner and it actually gets bloody tedious. However, there are still many hard to spot enemies in this game. But the R3 lock-on function is incredibly good at finding them for you. It will instantly tell you where enemies are, no matter how well hidden they are. So use this to make sure you're not being ganked too frequently. And unlike most third-person RPGs, the R3 button has another function in that when you press it, it will automatically make your camera face wherever your character is facing. So it will snap the camera in front of you every single time you press that button, unless there is a target to lock onto. In this game, it doesn't do that, which I absolutely love. As someone who gets motion sick very easily, that constant camera snapping when I'm trying to find a target to lock onto drives me mad and physically makes me feel sick. That doesn't happen in this game, which means you can spam that button to your heart's content, and it's a really smooth, seamless experience. Genuinely, it's one of my favourite things about this game. It seems like such a small thing at first, the fact that R3 does lock onto targets, but doesn't constantly snap your camera, but genuinely, it makes a world of difference. It was one of my favourite things to discover in this game. Absolutely love it. Use it frequently. On to tip number 4, let's talk about spells. Spells are one of the most fun features in Black Myth Wukong. There are some absolutely incredible spells in this game. Early on, you unlock the ability to immobilize enemies and even transform into a fire demon. You can also do things like turn your body into stone and even summon about a dozen clones of yourself. There are so many awesome, very powerful spells in this game. However, at least for the early game, my tip number 4 is to try and save most of your mana for boss fights. Because in the early game, there are very few ways to replenish your mana outside of resting and respawning everything. And spells are genuinely so powerful that they can easily turn the tide of battle and turn a seemingly unwinnable fight into a cakewalk. And for the most part, the normal enemies in this game aren't really going to be giving you any trouble, or not much trouble, should I say. Whereas the boss's difficulty ramps up pretty damn quickly. As soon as you start to get to bosses with 2 phases, that's right, we have 2-phase bosses in this game. It is all too easy to use up all of your tools in phase 1, thinking, this is tough, but I've got this. And then you go into phase 2 and you have used all of your spell slots, all of your items, and you're now thinking, well, fuck. So trust me, try and save your mana, try and save your items for sticky situations. They will instantly turn a really challenging situation into, hopefully, a walk in the park. Earlier in the video, we talked a bit about the Keeper's Shrines, this game's version of the Bonfire or the Site of Grace, whatever you want to call it, and talking specifically about resting at these shrines. I love the fact that you have to specify that you would like to rest before enemies respawn. This means that you can go back and you can use the shrines to do things like respecking, leveling up your boss souls, and selling your items without worrying about deleting your progression and respawning all of the enemies that you just spent the last 10 minutes defeating. So if you're still relatively stocked up on your healing items and you've got a good supply of health and mana, but you would like to go back to a shrine, you can do that without resetting your progress. It's amazing the fact that you can just go to the shrine, do what you need to do, just make sure you don't click rest, and you will still be exactly where you were. This next tip is probably my absolute favorite, because it's something I love to do in Souls-likes. So I adore when the developers do include it in the game. So, most of the objects in your environment are breakable, and that's fun, we all like breaking things. I especially like going around and smashing up jars. Bloodborne is one of my favourite games for that one particular room that's got like 100 jars in that you can just roll around in. Unfortunately, most Souls games, even with breakable objects, don't hide all that much in them, if anything at all. However, almost every single breakable object in this game has at least a small amount of will. And we'll talk about will later on in the video. This is the main currency for buying and upgrading all of your stuff. So you are genuinely rewarded big time for smashing every single thing you can see. So go mad and leave every single house, building and environment looking like an absolute tip by the time you leave. Tip number 7 is quite a simple one on the surface, but it really needs to be stressed that stamina management in this game is absolutely key because everything consumes stamina. As just one example, there are many ways to enhance your charged heavy attack in this game. You can hold your charged heavy and continue to charge your attack up whilst you are sprinting towards your opponent. The only problem is, even when the attack is already at maximum charge, it costs stamina to be able to hold it. So if you run out of stamina before you get to your enemy, all of that stamina and charge you have just built up goes to waste. You will get to your enemy depleted, you won't be able to attack, and they will just wreck your face in. And this applies to everything. If you transform into a cicada to fly past some enemies, that's going to cost stamina. If you sprint outside of combat while you're just looting, that costs stamina. And there are many times that you could get yourself into a sticky situation by sprinting for a while to grab some loot and then sprinting around a corner having not replenished your stamina and running into a mini-boss, because this game is full of mini-bosses. So take your time, run around the world just a little bit slower so you can keep your stamina topped up when you really need it. Obviously, into the mid and late game, this isn't going to be much of a problem because there is an absolute ton of talents that are going to help increase your stamina management, both the speed at which it replenishes and also the size of the bar itself, along with many other stamina efficiency perks. But these are 14 tips for new players for your early game. And early game stamina can become a problem if you don't keep an eye on it. On that note, before we move into tip number 8, if you are curious what the mid game and the late game look like, make sure you are subscribed to the channel because I will be bringing out loads of Black Myth Wukong guides over the coming weeks, including advanced tips for the mid game, expert tips for the late game, and many other boss walkthrough and build guides. This next tip may only benefit PC players because I'm not sure how it works on console. I am talking about the benchmark tool. I'm not sure if this came out on console because I don't know if there are any graphics options apart from just quality mode and performance mode. But basically this tip is to run the game and play around with the options on the benchmark and then take a screenshot of the options you're happy with and mimic them in the game. Because they are two separate applications and your options won't automatically transfer over, and there's nothing worse than getting your benchmark settings perfect and then moving over to the actual game and realizing you have no idea what you set the options to, and now suddenly your game looks beautiful but it's running at like 10 FPS. What I strongly recommend that works for me, I will leave my PC specs down in the description of this video so you can try and compare your setup to mine. Basically, if you have a look through your graphics options, around half of them will say something like significantly impacts performance. I bumped them ones specifically down to medium or high, and I left everything else on very high. Aside from that, I also turned off motion blur and running the game at 1440p. I've set my resolution scaling, I believe they called it, to 61, which is the very top end of balanced just before you go into quality. And as you've seen from this video, my game runs incredibly smooth, and hopefully you can see it even after YouTube has processed that it looks pretty damn gorgeous as well. Tip number 9 is to be as eagle-eyed as you can as you explore this game. From what I can tell up to this point, unless you unlock it later on, there is no minimap and there are many hidden paths. Already only a couple of hours in, I have encountered 2 hidden optional bosses and a hidden optional NPC. I'm sure there will be many more, and the more hidden rare items and materials you find, the better stuff you're going to be able to craft and the easier the late game will become. And this is a very challenging game, so the more exploration you do and the more super secret stuff you find, the easier you're going to make it for yourself. As I love to do, I will probably make a video or two on the most missable things, so keep your eyes peeled for them, but that won't be for a few days because unfortunately I didn't get early access to this title, so I'm still progressing through this game at the same rate as you. Tip number 10 is about boss souls. These work more similarly to Neo than any other Souls-like I can think of. And basically, when you defeat certain bosses and mini-bosses, you'll be able to claim their lost souls, bring them back to a Keeper's Shrine, and learn how to use their spirit skills and upgrade or cultivate them. Now, tip number 10 is twofold. Firstly, you don't unlock this ability until a certain way through the game, and if you're brave enough to tackle a few optional side bosses before that point, you won't be able to claim their lost souls. You won't have the ability to do this. And if you're anything like me, you'll be like, oh shit, have I just locked myself out of a huge part of the game? Why can I not interact with this? This seems really bad. Do not fret, because when you do unlock this ability, you'll be able to interact with any Keeper's Shrine and their souls will be there waiting for you to claim them. So you haven't lost anything by being proactive and being good at the game. You will get them at the next available opportunity. Now, as for how they work, you can equip one boss soul or spirit, whatever you want to call it, and this will do two things. It will apply both a passive buff to you, and it will give you the ability to trigger one of the boss's attacks. You'll only be able to use this so often, and fighting enemies is how you recharge this ability. My personal favourite so far is the Wandering Wight, because the passive is you get a moderate increase to your defense, and when you use the ability, you need to be pretty damn close to enemies. It's easy to miss, but you turn into the Wandering Wight, you hunker down, and you ram the enemy, dealing massive damage. And if you have enough will and other items, remember will is the main currency for this game, then at the Keeper's Shrine you can cultivate them to upgrade them and make their effects and abilities more and more powerful. So along with all of the other systems in the game, make sure you do not neglect this because it can really help you out in a sticky situation. The next tip is about meditation. If you have a look in your journey, you'll be able to see how many meditation spots there are in each zone. So throughout your thorough exploration, make sure that you're checking back frequently to make sure you've got all of the meditation spots. Because what this is going to do for you is two things. Firstly, it will grant you extra sparks so you can level up more frequently. And also, if you're someone who really loves to appreciate the atmosphere and the environments in games, it gives you such a cool cutscene of the surrounding areas to just help familiarize yourself with the environment and really soak in how awesome and beautiful this game really is. Oh, and also, bonus little tip for you, there's a photo mode in this game. God, I wish more games had this. Elden Ring, please add photo mode. But yeah, I love that. I love that there's a photo mode. Use that. Join my Discord server, show me all of your awesome cinematic Black Myth Wukong shots in the artwork channel. I would absolutely love to see your best photo mode pictures. Tip number 12, I touched on this a little bit earlier on in the video. Nice quick one. Make sure you are subscribed to Dom's Roundtable for frequent, up-to-date, high-quality Black Myth Wukong guides, along with loads of other gaming guides for lots of upcoming titles, including Space Marine 2 and Frostpunk 2. Also, once you've subscribed and liked the video, you're down there already. You're pretty close to the comments section. So whilst you're there, you may as well tell me what game you are most excited for coming out this year, so I know what to cover, I know what people are wanting, I know what people are anticipating, and also, I'm just curious, are you looking forward to anything that I've missed? I always want more games. Tell me your games. What games are you playing? I want games. Tip number 13, the penultimate tip for this video, is to sell your treasure at any shrine because there appears to be no other use for it. As you progress right at the start, you will just come upon these tiny pieces of gold and other treasure items as well. And exactly as the item description says, a tiny piece of gold, its origin indiscernible, perhaps some trade could be done at the Keeper's Shrine. Well, as we know, the Keeper's Shrine is just this game's bonfire, and there is absolutely no other option other than sell. There is no other way to interact with this treasure. So as far as we're aware, only purpose is to give you a big injection to your will so that you can then buy and upgrade more things. Because unlike in other Souls titles, you don't have like a soul of a lost warrior or a soul of a wandering hero, stuff like that, to give you a little boost, to give you a little injection to your main currency. So these appear to be this game's way of doing that. And just to give you an example of exactly how much will you need, you can see here if I go into crafting, to craft a new armor set I just unlocked, the Serpent Scale set, for just the chest, arms and legs, it's going to cost me nearly 3,000 will, which is over half of the will I have stored up at the moment. And then even more than this, if I go to cultivate a spirit, you can see to get the Wandering Wight up to level 4, it's going to cost me 6,000 will. So you need a lot of this, so don't be afraid to sell all your treasure. Because remember, dying won't make you lose all your currency. There is absolutely no harm in selling it all and stockpiling it. And the final tip, nice and quick and easy, pick up everything. You never know when you are going to need so many materials. Crafting weapons, crafting armor, and upgrading everything costs a lot more than you think it might. So you'd be like, why have I got 40 of these mushrooms? I have never seen anything that uses these mushrooms. Suddenly, you'll unlock an item that needs like 100 mushrooms to craft. So pick up every single thing. You never know when you will need it. And it's a really good feeling to unlock a new armor set or a new weapon and be able to craft the whole entire thing straight away instead of having to go back and keep farming and farming just so you can finally use the new thing. And that, my friends, is my 14 beginner tips or things you need to know early, whatever you want to call it, for Black Myth Wukong. I'll be coming out with more guides over the coming days, so keep your eyes peeled. And for now, all that's left for me to say is thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an amazing day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.